Elizabeth Debold. It's really good to be having this conversation with you. Today we're going to be speaking about emergent dialogue and many more fascinating and deeply present and important things in human development right now. So
great. Thanks, Jacob. It's really good to be here and great to be with you. I'm really curious to see where this dialogue goes.
So just to sort of introduce a little for listeners, you are one of the co-founders of Emergent Dialogue, but I know that and that might not be the precise right wording for it. So I want to sort of give you the opportunity to properly introduce yourself, because I know you've had a long career in different areas before sort of arriving at what you're doing now.
So you want me to do that now?
Yeah, please.
Okay. So let's see, where to start. I guess to say I'm trained as a developmental psychologist, and my focus of research is on gender identity and gender development. And I think the question that I was seeking to answer in engaging with that is really, how do we come together beyond difference? And in the years of my growing up, which would be the 60s and 70s, and I think it's still the case, if not even worse, that this kind of divide or division between the sexes was, it was the stuff of jokes. It was just so part of the fabric of culture, that this is that we're not the same kinds of beings, and that sense of being oppositional to each other, or polar opposites, or somehow fundamentally not human together, was something that bothered me very deeply. And it just seemed, it's like, what kind of love can you have in a context like that? You can the notion that opposites attract, as in terms of human beings, is a 19th century notion. And it's how do we truly have respect and dignity and love in a context where you experience the other as other, as an opposite. So that was my work, and I was a feminist activist for women's rights. I then went to Harvard to study developmental psychology in order to say, okay, where does this start? What are the developmental linchpins here? And then I became part of a spiritual community in which one of the things that the community was working on was the leader put it as an enlightenment beyond the individual. Is there a way that something, that a consciousness field can be held and awakened between us? Is there something that can be awakened between us? And that's been the foundation for the work that Thomas Steininger and I have been doing on Emergent Dialogue. That was the foundation for it. And what is interesting about that to me is that it puts human beings in a context that actually changes the assumptions about what it means to be male and female, or what it is to be human. And in that opens up a possibility for connection that is beyond the ways that we typically divide from each other. So emergent dialogue is the practice of that.
That was really, really, really wonderful to hear. And it sounds like there was an almost spiritual quality to the way that you were approaching gender and sex from early on. Just the way that you describe it to me feels so unifying,
Mm.
and not polarizing.
It's interesting, like my mother and father didn't get along at all. And actually my mother who's now 93 said to my brother something that shocked him. The vehemence that she said, I hated him about my father. I hated him. And yet every day he would come home from work and she would go and kiss him on the cheek and welcome him home. And, there was all this pretense of relationship, and this is what people do who are married and who love each other. And yet there was a lot underneath. And it was that I love my father very much. I mean, he had many faults. I love my mother also. And the fact that there was something so deeply wrong between them was, um, you know, and that when I look at other families and at and at the culture at large, or this didn't seem to be terribly different, even despite all the trappings of romance and so forth. It didn't seem to be fundamentally different with other people. So it was like, wow, what is this? What is this? So I don't know if that's spiritual or not, but it was, what do to love one and not the other was a betrayal. And I think that sometimes, or oftentimes, children are put in that position where they're asked by one parent to betray the other, and that's a very painful thing. But it's part of a setup that is wrong, that is inhuman.
I think it's, yeah, whether or not the word's spiritual, it feels very fundamental. Like
Mm.
it's beginning to perceive the meeting of men and women as like a sort of very fundamental place of interaction in all of civilization and culture. It's in many ways the most intimate, the um, most meaningful. It's where a lot of the possibility of change,
Mm.
transformation, traumatization,
Mm.
like whatever way things are moving, a relationship is really the closest place where, um, the threads can be pulled and the complexity of life can begin to be revealed
Mm.
in the understanding of the meeting of two people. And
Mm.
then, as you speak to in these kind of these roles, um, or personas that people are in, identities that people are in, then there can be a playing out,
Mm.
um, that isn't necessarily an inquiry.
Right. I think that's an understatement, right? Isn't necessarily an inquiry. Yeah, definitely. And it's also, it also is an incredible limit on our imagination. It creates an incredible narrowing of possibility. That's, like you said, it's a place where weaving can take place, where possibility can be expressed, hope, potential. And in these roles and in this division between men and women, the limitations that are placed on our imagination, on our potential for visioning, which I think are acutely needed right now at this point in time. It leaves us constantly trying to make something happen that can't happen in the context that is. And yet what I'm pointing to is something that is a profound change. And emergent dialogue is a profound change. It calls us to something to be attentive and nurture something very different in ourselves than what we're accustomed to.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah. No, it's just as you were speaking, I was feeling this like opening up of the many, all of the strong historical forces that have been exerted on society, whether it's war or whether
Mm.
it's technology, and media. All of these things, like they're so like where you really get to see them is in the relationships.
Mm.
And I've explored some of this on the podcast already with regards to my own experience, like
Mm.
how much, I mean, of course, the epidemic of divorce in the
Mm.
last
Mm-hmm.
few decades, really, the last period is sort of an unprecedented
Mm.
event in
Mm.
Western culture.
Mm.
And really, I feel there's a coming, I mean, I feel there's a coming to terms in this time, in this historical moment, with so much history, of all different kinds, whether it's um, racial history or the legacy of the Enlightenment scientific rational worldview, um, or whether it's the inheritance of um, the trauma of war and
Mm.
brutalization and all of that stuff that kind of got unleashed. And then there was sort of a return to normalcy in culture. And my grandfather was in the Second World War, my great grandfather, First World War. And so there's a lot of direct lineage connection for me with these threads. And so, yeah, I mean, I began to see in the course of my journey that I was somehow like my relationship with world, my relationship, therefore, with each different partner that I would have over time was connected with
Mm.
the deeper roots, of history and culture, and having sort of been through that rude awakening and journey and really a sort of healing process out of that. It's like I can see that now.
Mm.
And I see then that, okay, maybe there's a lot of normalcy which is rested on great complexity
Mm-hmm.
in relationships, in the way that things just are.
Mm.
If you can sort of scratch away at that, or rather, if you can sort of create a space or a context in which what is can be really opened up and understood in the
Mm-hmm.
context of relationships, then perhaps we really begin to see the full yarn
Mm-hmm.
of what makes up Boy Meets Girl.
Yeah. Right. 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 And it's interesting. Uh, uh, the the how do I want to put it? The recognition that we are not, that our personal story is really the end point, is the end point of a larger historical process, and that we're part of, we're standing at an amazing point. A friend of mine, who was the former executive director of the Zen Peacemakers, he spoke about recognizing, like, that there's you, and there's your parents, and there's your grandparents, and your great great grandparents, and there's this pyramid that we stand on, of generation after generation, and war, and different cultural movements and refugees and all of these historical currents that have played out in one's family background, but coming together here, it's like, okay, now what?
Mm.
And now what is a really important question, because at this point, the way we have defined each other as masculine, feminine, male, female, mother, father, is actually coming out of a system of thinking that that is part of what is leading to the kinds of crises that we're facing. The relationship between man, the conqueror, and matter and mother, mater, have the same root, and that's not an accident. There's a sense of a kind of putting down of the feminine that has been part of Western culture for so long, that that a kind of reshaping of who we are according to what is most important. And I think this is what's interesting. If you look back in history, cultures are formed by what they feel is most eternal, what they feel is that which will that is the absolute foundation. And modernity was founded on a split between the male and the female. I wouldn't even, you could call it the masculine and the feminine, but also the world of work versus the home and family life, that this whole sort of divided system that was based on gender, that men and women were so different that they inhabited different worlds. The modern world was built on that. And it's not like what was before in the medieval world, which is built on God as the foundation, as the creator of everything. And here we have a gender system as the kind of bottom line foundation for modern culture. And that so it's like who we are as men and women are the core unit of a system that needs to be opened up and its energy released, so that something more deeply true can become the foundation of what we do as humans.
Yeah, I really had never heard that sort of that delineation that you just made between the modern male female relationship and the medieval or the Christian and so forth. It's been really interesting for me moving to Bavaria and moving to a little village that's sort of in the area that would have once been the Holy Roman Empire, sort of Catholic
Right.
territory. And so there's a real sense of like living inside of the story of Christianity. There's depictions on the houses in my street. If you go on a hike, there's the Stations of the Cross.
There's the cross at the top of the mountain.
Yes, indeed, at the highest point. And it's in it, there is this central role of the Mary figure. There's almost this, it's rather than a trinity to me, it seems to be more like a grouping of four. And you have the Holy Spirit as the bird, Jesus, the bearded patriarch, God, and then Mary, or Mary with child. And so it's almost like this was the organizing story of the gender relationship in some way as well. And then when that story kind of gets, however, when God dies for modern man and the story goes out, then you're sort of left with the inheritance of that, but without the
without the divine, right? Without anything sacred in it, or that relationship. Then the romantic relationship becomes the sacred thing, and And if you think about that, if you think about the purpose of the sacredness in its orientation towards intrinsic deep meaning, and creating a culture in which romantic love becomes the sacred thing, it's not that deep. I mean, I'm not saying that human beings don't have very deep romantic relationships, but it's very idiosyncratic. It's very material, actually. We're talking about the intimate love and sex bond between a man and a woman as the pinnacle of sacredness in modern culture. And that's comparing that to something like God. It's quite a downshift. It's like, whoa, okay, we're gonna go to something very very, in a sense, ordinary, although no one wants their own love relationship to be considered ordinary. But that's also part of the mystique and lure of romantic love. It is special, completely special. You're special in it, and so is your partner special. But and that's what you have against the entire crazy world. You have that bond, and it's supposed to be the thing that makes it all worthwhile. And that's quite a heavy thing to do to another human being, It's quite a heavy responsibility, burden, whatever, obligation held by one's partner. Which is why divorce, I think, is often so ugly. It's. I mean, in indigenous cultures, there was often divorce, but divorce wasn't like that. It was like, okay, it didn't seem to be about revenge and recrimination, but it was like, okay, we're moving to other partners now, and which is very different from and I think it has to do with from what's going on now. And I think what it has to do with is that this source of meaning is one of the few sort of absolute sources of meaning that we have in modern and postmodern culture.
Yeah, I think there is something. So we kind of threw out Jesus and Mary and got the Marlboro Man and Playboy magazine.
Right. It's like, right. Yeah.
Yeah. Lay on 5 decades of pornography and see what you get. But yeah, I think there is something. I mean, that's truly the most profound experience that you can have in relationship to another human being, is to experience them as sacred. And for that meeting to somehow be a meeting of something much greater than just the two of you. But, in a certain sense, the cosmos is meeting the cosmos. And then that can be, that to me is sort of the pinnacle of my own relationship with my partner is like, those are sort of the most powerful moments of connection. And we also met sort of doing emergent dialogues together. So it's there's some important connection about a relationship that, like, the dialogue is so important to relationship. It is the channel, it's the meeting point. It's where things are going wrong or getting stuck or opening up or deepening, or getting playful or whatever it is. So yeah, it's an incredible journey to be in a relationship and to have a approach to dialogue that somehow gives you a chance at carrying through all of the tough junctures. And yeah, it's, I mean, what do you, I'd love to sort of go into the broader sense of the vision for this, but I'm wondering just initially, how do you see that the kind of real transformation in dialogue that you're bringing with your work and that is like sort of bubbling up right now in terms of really giving people the capacities and giving people a sense of something quite new and different to experience in dialogue together. Where do you see that sort of fitting in with relationship, with male female relationship?
Well, I think in the emergent dialogue that we're working with, that in order to engage in the dialogue, one has to cultivate two different things that have traditionally been assigned to one or the other gender. And one is a deep receptivity, which is, you could say, agape or agapic, or feminine. That the capacity to hold, to open to hold, to be a container for a conversation, or for conflict, or for creative friction, or to be able to have that kind of very deep, a deep capacity for openness. That's one thing. And the other is to have a willingness to leap off the edge. And by that I mean that in a space of profound openness, in a place of deep surrendered openness to this moment here, right now, that there is a movement, a motive, a movement of creative eros, I would call it, that comes from that, and the ability to, without arranging oneself or knowing beforehand, to be able to speak from that and to speak into that, and to take a leap, which is traditionally more what men do, often physically, but taking a creative leap, a leap of mind, a leap of faith, of you could think about it as kind of parkour of the being. It's like leaping through being willing to go off an edge and to find out what's next in an exploratory way, which is something that is more you could say male oriented, the way men are trained to be at very different levels, physically for some, mentally, creatively, and for others, but this capacity to risk, to take the risk of responding to something that you don't quite know yet, that you don't have figured out, that you're not sure where it's going. That those two and those two together are what one needs to engage in emergent dialogue. So it's an openness and a dynamic not knowing, and wanting and leaping to know. And that for it's interesting because men and women, and this is stereotypically come into this practice, men often trying to reach it with their minds, men and right, you laugh, to kind of find their way through by thinking about it or thinking their way through it, and women by trying to feel their way through it, and it doesn't, neither works. It's neither of those dimensions. It is an openness that is an openness at a level of being that is fully embodied, but it's not about the body per se. It's about the body as an instrument of perception, and an openness in that is an openness of a field awareness that is bigger than us and bigger than any group of people who are engaging in dialogue. And then this that which comes through is something that comes through the group, and different people in the group become kind of twig to it, and have it meet something in their experience that they can bring forward, and from a place of not knowing. And that to me disrupts a certain fundamental gender dynamic around active and passive, or agentic and receptive. That is where the masculine and the feminine have been divided. And it's really holding these two things together at one time. And so it's a stretch for all of us to live from an attitude and a way of being that is not what one has been socialized to be. But that's why I think it takes who we are as human beings, and it brings us to a different place together.
Yeah, it strikes me that there's almost it's certainly a catalytic space to be in for growth, because it's continually, insofar as you're in flow with it, it is continually bringing you to a kind of learning edge space. And it does have that quality of synthesizing the mental, cognitive, patterning possibility of the mind, and of the sensing, of the spatial, of the sapience. Like I feel there is like an ancient quality to it as well. As well as I wrote a brief essay a while back on Dialogos, and in that I sort of tried to give a bit of an artistic story about Logos and about the origins of Logos, and sort of look, okay, there is this deep mythos in like Christianity and that tradition in which we can find Logos. But then I wanted to bring in this more indigenous sapience, that this, in some ways, we're bringing through a capacity that's deeply originary to human beings, to be able to come into this level of connection and attunement with one another, with both that sort of sensing feminine attunement quality and the agency and cognitive aspects as well. And you can imagine that that's the sort of thing that would be supportive of a band of hunters. Tracking, there's a lot of sort of sensing where are the tracks and not really knowing and communicating about that, but also the totally letting loose in pursuit of the truth, which in this case is catching the animal.
Your mammoth. Yeah.
But as you were speaking, I was feeling like there's a bit of a necessary reckless abandon to speak the truth in certain moments, or to sort of give over to the things that are being spoken through your relationship to the space.
Yeah, I think this sense of that something, the truth that comes through the space between, and being open to that is very different than from speaking one's own truth. And I think, I mean, you're pointing to the hunters and so forth. The thing that I think that the extra level that we need to get beyond, or that we're on the precipice of, is that we also have this whole, let's say the hunters were more naturally in coherence, or in a world, a shared world, because the kind of individuation that we have and that we have cultivated for so long has really taken us out of that sense of community. And now to make a conscious choice to re-engage, or to step beyond or experience beyond just one's self boundaries, and really lean into that which is between, and to be able to make to distinguish between something that wants to be said through, as part of arrows coming through the group as a whole, and this time it's speaking to you. There's something in your experience that needs to be brought into the whole to keep the conversation going, or to allow the learning to happen in the group. That requires us to do something, to transcend, you could say, the immediate needs and experiences of our personal self, and that we as highly individuated beings have to learn how to distinguish this, and also to it ends up meaning to renounce the part of ourselves that says that goes in all kinds of different directions, while one is in the middle of a circle that is attempting to engage from this intersubjective space and its motive force.
I can feel in that it's almost, there is a discipline to this. I certainly consider it a practice, but there's a real there's a discipline that's trained. It seems to me very connected with the discipline you practice in meditation, of thoughts arising and sort of coming back to a curiosity, or an openness, an open center point.
Yeah, we very much see meditation as a really helpful practice for this, and because it does allow you to start to be objective, or have a felt sense of your interior world that you can let go of being so dominant in your psyche. I mean, there are certainly a lot of people who can't make that separation, who are just in themselves, and they're in their world, and they're engaging from that, and that's it. But meditation gives you the capacity helps you develop the capacity to have some space between that world and you could say reality as a whole, in a sense. And that is a discipline that we feel is like quite important to develop. And the thing is that this is very new, and it's also very, as you know, that these are practices that are emergent right now, and in their newness, we all make mistakes. I mean, we all fall on our faces. We all leap, and we're leaping in our in known territory, or just repeating ourselves, or kind of choke at the edge, or I mean, we do all these things, and that's part of the learning process, and the part of the refining of one's alignment with that which is that wants to be known and is not yet.
There's something profoundly playful I was hearing in that as well. But then there's this very curious pull that I feel when you speak to like the thing that is not yet known, and sort of orienting to that thing. Like we're almost growing the curiosity within ourselves, as like a more and more powerful part of what's guiding our lives in a certain way. Like it's I think perhaps normatively curiosity is something that just sort of comes around and goes away, and it's not really doesn't have this like muscle almost quality, and when you do this like inquiry into the unknown in dialogue with people, you begin to grow that muscle, and it comes through into other dimensions of your life, hopefully, as well, and sort of opens out things there. But it's really when I use the word curiosity, it feels for me like something sort of up here, and where it's come to rest in dialogue has been like much more here. Like it feels like the curiosity is very much coming from the center and pulling me towards the horizon. And it's really taken on a stronger and stronger spatial sense in like the last maybe 3 months or something, or 4 months. It's really begun to feel like something that I'm coming back into contact with each time that I'm coming into dialogue, and also outside of the dialogue.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I feel that this this way of working recalibrates our like you're saying, curiosity. What I would have thought curiosity was maybe 30 years ago would have been much more intellectual. Like, oh, so and so wrote something about that. I'm very curious. I really want to read it. I really want to know it. I really want to find out. But this curiosity is like it's like a life force itself. This other curiosity. It pulls at the center of your being, and that pull is not related to emotionality, which is very interesting, because you put your hand on your kind of your heart center, and it's like, oh, that's the curiosity of the heart, but it's not an emotive quality, although it has a love in it. It has a generosity in it. It has a care in it that is not part of what we usually think of as curiosity, but those qualities come with that pull towards like, so what's next here? What will happen next? what will be revealed here, what wants to be known here. And that is it's a different kind of curiosity, but it has a more fullness to it.
I had a feeling when I was first experiencing these kinds of dialogues that I was touching on something that had been pulling me throughout my life in the years up to that point, and all these different things that I had been inexplicably drawn to. Suddenly, years later, in discovering this dialogue, were beginning to sort of be drawn together, and there was a sense of the threads being gathered and organized harmonically. In my case, things like, I don't know if you're familiar with Terrence McKenna, but his work and his way of being and his style, there was something about that was so curious to me, and something that he was sort of weaving at the end of each sentence that he would speak that called out to me. And I think it is that same thing. It's that same thing that drew me to Dialogos when I found it through sort of Jordan Hall and John Vervaeke and Guy Sengstock and Chris Mastropietro, and then later discovering you guys and many other individuals sort of gathering and having been on really profound long journeys up to that point that met them there, that had them organizing in that way.
I think this is often the real mystery of one's spiritual life, because I would say that this is core to one's reckoning with spirit, in a certain sense, that you come to realize that something's been moving you, and you thought you were making choices, right? You thought you were making choices based on things that you were kind of interested in, but then you realize it's like, oh wow, there's a weave to this. There's some other intention that I am being driven by, that is bigger than my own, or is not something that is in my conscious mind. It's in something much deeper in me. And I think, and then you step back, and as you're saying, you see all these other people kind of approaching and grappling with and exploring and opening up the same thing, and you go, oh ho, this is actually something that is pulling in the cosmos. This is something that is actually wanting to be made, to be realized, that we're on the edge of something here that wants to be known. And that's, to actually really take that in, is very both humbling, and also really allows one to relax, and relax in a deep way, not like, oh, now I'm done. Now I can just be driven by this thing. But it allows one to trust oneself in a deeper way, as something that is not separate from this movement in life. You realize it's like, oh, I am moving with a current that is of the life space that we're in, of the cosmos, of the questions that are arising out of the life conditions on Earth right now. This is a step for human beings to take, and I'm not separate from that. And that is gives one deep confidence about life itself and about one's relationship to it. And then the work of humility, the work of improving one's capacity to give to it, to surrender to it, to be available to it. Then it's like, oh, that's my work. then my work is to be a better vessel for this. And that to me is what spiritual life is about.
And there's such a sense for me of the expansiveness of that, of like when you give over to the mission of this work and the full flowering of the meaning and vastness of what it might actually be. There's a trust in it, and it's an unknown that offers much more possibility than whatever I myself could think up.
Right.
Or like
right.
where I might be in 10 years.
Yeah. Right. I want to connect with that point in a slightly to the side a little bit. It's real. As a developmental psychologist, as you know, there are all kinds of maps out there that tell us what the next step is, right? And what we're talking about is not on that map, on any of those maps. And isn't that interesting? You know, that we have maps of higher and higher development of the individual, but that this kind of like coming out of left field, you know, this impulse that is like, oh, we can, from a place of non-separation, be part of a larger force of synergy that and collective sense making that appears to want to have its way with us. that appears to want us to lean into this. That wasn't on the map. And I find that really fascinating. To me, it gives it more legitimacy, because it's like, oh, these structures and you know, the maps are based on data in certain ways, but data within Western culture that is incredibly individuated. So it has, of course, is the next steps in individuation. But the kind of predictive, this is where we're going. It's like, maybe not. You know, this doesn't seem to be, you know, holding more and more complexity with the mind, which is often what these models are about, or more capacities for complexity and perspective taking and so on and so forth. All that's really great, but it's not, it doesn't seem to be, what this suggests is that this doesn't seem to be where we need to go. That the complexity can be held in a group, in a collective, in a way that is profoundly different from the complexity that is held in an individual mind. And the foundation of what is held, of how this is held, is a care and a love that is that is actually profoundly sacred. And it's like, that is like, oh wow, what does that mean about what's next, what's needed, and who we are?
That's beautiful. There's a profound, like, mysteriousness that sort of emanates from you as you speak about these things. And I've noted in my experiences attending the Emergent Dialogue course that you guys are running, that the field that is being generated by you and Thomas as you're speaking is really quite psychoactive and healing to listen to, in a very strange kind of way. But I feel it moving things in me when I tune into it, and it's I exalt the version of it that flows through the two of you, and I also recognize it as something that I'm hearing from others in different corners at once. There's a continuity to it, and it's so fascinating that the I mean, I've been reading Pierre de Jardin, The Future of Man, and it's blowing my fucking mind.
That's amazing. Yeah. No, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
But
I mean, he or Abindo, who's there are a few others. Names are escaping me, but they had the capacity. I mean, this is, if you think about the evolutionary history of this or the developmental history of this, they had the capacity to tune in and vision this. This is something that they were able to tap into and see, and which is amazing. To turn it into how can we do this together? They didn't have that piece, but they had the this is it. This is where humankind can head for, and seems to be part of the plan here. But the how do we live that? How do we do this together? That seems to have come in much more recently, and which is also completely fascinating and kind of goosebumpy, like, whoa. Just fascinating, and you feel like wow, how did I even just the privilege of being part of this is just mind-boggling.
It's like that feeling of like, guys, the journey's not over yet.
Yeah,
we thought it was over, and we thought we'd reached it, and now the sky opens and there's this profoundly strange and unspeakable horizon on the horizon, that these different people who were like so dropped into the through lines of history in some way, or becoming in some way spiritual channels, were able to see this. Desjardins is one that is amazing, and I think Terrence Mckenna too was influenced by him, and they both saw us heading towards some kind of point in the planetization and into technologization and the realm of the virtual and all of this that was gonna it's about to get strange in ways that only psychedelic trips will prepare you for. Like that's sort of the place where you could get a sense of how strange this new future could well be.
Strange to the logico-rational instrumental mind, right? And yet seems to be very related to, as you brought in before, indigenous wisdom and the kinds of causation, which is nonlinear, that many indigenous people are in touch with, and people who have really been able to keep and study and stay with their traditions. But there's a harmony or a resonance between what's happening now and the wisdom from indigenous cultures that I think could create a very powerful synergy again, synergetic coming together. There's something that you said before about, I know, it was about healing. And I wanted to pick up on that because I think it's a really important aspect of this. And I think it's really important for most of us postmoderns who are engaged in shadow work and healing processes and so forth, all of which are really important and good and are endless. And there is, I mean, we don't heal in separation, not truly. We can't heal in separation. And a lot of our shadow work and healing practices end up being trying to take your separate self and fix it somehow, when really the issue is about relatedness. And by that I don't mean relationship, although that's part of it, but being whole and in wholeness. And it's that fracturing of wholeness and breaking off of our relatedness and becoming fragments ourselves, and within ourselves being fragmented, that is what we are longing to heal, because it's so painful. But I think part of what this practice of emergent dialogue does is it allows us to actually taste and be in a space of wholeness. And that space of wholeness is healing. It's not the intention of our work to do healing per se, but the opening of oneself and the discovery of the trustworthiness of life itself, the trustworthiness of one's deepest impulses, as we were saying before, that are leading you into this space, the non-separation that one actually experiences between people, that wow, somehow there's a coherence here that is giving me the experience of not being separate. And it doesn't mean that we're the same either. But this complex this complex unity that is not a flat we're all the same or we are one, but it holds within it who we are as unique beings, and yet holds something much bigger than us as each of our ground, and that's not separate from each other. That experience is deeply healing. And I yeah, and it and then that is opens the door to, I think, being active and engaging in ways that, rather than just waiting to be healed or hoping that one can find healing somewhere.
It's really striking that the process of becoming more yourself and the process of becoming more of what's more than yourself in these group fields and experiences are mutually affording.
Mm-hmm.
And it's exactly what Jardin says, that at the sort of precipice of, like, we're all getting closer and closer together, there's going to be some deeper organization. Is it going to be one of control? Or is there some way that we can open up a new path that somehow is exalting of the individual and of that which is more, and the we, and beyond the we as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it's important to recognize that the we in the we space, or or whatever one wants to call it, is not just the people who are in the room. And it doesn't mean that it's okay, so then it's more people. It's not that either. The we is this dimension that is larger than the group. The we is actually that which holds us all and all of life, and our growing and developing capacity to be able to experience that as a living presence is I feel what we're all on the edge of, and that shift would be a profound shift in who we are and how we are together. Because you realize that the kind of the fundamental assumption of meeting another human, or of being in the world and recognizing one's seamless interrelatedness or already relatedness with everything that lives, and eye to eye with another human being, to see another human being as of this and of this same creative force that wants to come through, that would, would you make policy then? How would you set up a community? It radically changes the foundation of what we assume is real.
Wow. it's I don't think I'm ever going to find the right moment to draw it to a close, because I just feel that this is a jam that could continue for much longer, and I'm hoping that we're going to speak again and further this conversation. But I want to draw a temporary thread through this conversation. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Awesome. It's been a privilege.
Been a pleasure. Yeah, a pleasure for me. Privilege also. Thank you so much.